New York State Attorney General Letitia James is suing the Trump Organization for $250 million over its business practices.
The New York Attorney General claims that the company manipulated its property valuations for years in an effort to game the system.
We are filing a lawsuit against Donald Trump for violating the law as part of his efforts to generate profits for himself, his family, and his company. The complaint demonstrates that Donald Trump falsely inflated his net worth by billions of dollars to unjustly enrich himself and to cheat the system, thereby cheating all of us.
Additionally, this lawsuit looks to cancel the company's business certificate and permanently ban the former president and his adult children from their roles in the company.
Here to discuss more on this is CBS News investigative reporter Graham Kates. Also joining us now is CBS News legal contributor and professor of Loyola Law School, Jessica Levinson. Graham, I'm going to start with you. Break this down for us. First of all, how significant is it that the Attorney General is going directly after the former president and his 3 adult children, as well as what we just heard the AG say, that her intent is to dissolve these Trump corporations here in New York?
Yeah, she made it clear they're seeking to end their ability to do business in New York. And effectively, what that means is that's going to be a tremendous effect on the company because the company is based in New York. A lot of its properties are in New York. And they alleged widespread, years-long fraud, really at every level of the company. She was talking about famous properties like Mar-a-Lago and golf courses, as well as, individual apartments where she's accusing them of kind of playing with the valuations in order to inflate Trump's value himself.
Yeah, not just playing with them. In the case of Mar-a-Lago, $75 million valuation. They listed it at $739 million, more than 10 times as much. And she says that that was rampant throughout.
Yeah, I mean, and then those apartments I was talking about, there's a dozen apartments that are rent stabilized that were appraised at $750,000, but were listed at being worth $49.5 million. I mean, it's a tremendous difference. And they were saying that this was a years-long practice of violating what are called generally accepted accounting principles.
Let's bring in Jessica Levinson to talk more about this, because, Jessica, if you listen to what the Attorney General said, is that based on the evidence from this decade, there is, quote, intentional and deliberate fraud. She went on when being asked about how no one else found out about this. She's like, look, it's not as if these were good faith mistakes. So just lay out for us how significant this individual lawsuit is amongst what? The ecosystem of legal challenges facing the former president right now.
Can I just say, I think you zeroed in on exactly the right language, because when it comes to whether or not there would be a civil complaint against the Trump Organization, Trump himself, his adult children, and others, the question has always been, could he try and obfuscate and say it was an honest mistake? I wasn't the one to sign those documents. Or, you know what, when it comes to real estate, it's really complicated in terms of how you value real estate. You wouldn't understand it, but trust me, we use generally accepted practices. And time again, the New York Attorney General used the language that you pointed out here, the intent, knowledge. This was not an honest mistake. And I think it was so important that that was part of her overall theme here, to explain this isn't something that just happened accidentally 1 or 2 times. She mentioned hundreds of such situations, and every time said they knew what they were doing, they intended to defraud. That matters not just for Trump's defense in the political arena, but it matters in the courtroom. When it comes to civil fraud, when it comes to civil misrepresentation, you have to show that level of intent. And that's what she was doing throughout. And I highlighted one quote, and I think this is what she kept trying to come back to. He lied to gain massive financial benefits for himself. He lied, not he accidentally, not he used accounting practices he thought might have been acceptable. He lied over and over again.
We should also just...
Now you asked...
I just want to quickly mention, President Trump has released a statement. He calls these meritless claims. He says the Attorney General is just trying to advance her political agenda. The former president says there's been no wrongdoing that's taken place here. I just wanted to get that in so we understand the former president has responded, saying it's all wrong. How significant is it where this information came from? The Attorney General mentioned Michael Cohen and his testimony to Congress, and also Alan Weisselberg, who has already pleaded guilty. to financial fraud in another case. How significant is that?
So it is and it isn't, in the sense that it is, I think politically, it matters that this information came from somebody who worked for Trump, who used to be really one of his right-hand men, who would have the knowledge, who understood, who isn't a Democratic operative, for instance. But legally speaking, you follow the evidence. And so I think the Attorney General, Letitia James, she has to say, look, we got these crumbs initially that we followed from Michael Cohen during his testimony. But in terms of a court of law, we're going to hear different arguments than we hear outside the courtroom. And frankly, President Trump's statement just now, he tried to make that statement in court. He tried to have this investigation thrown out. A judge said no. We really have to focus on the difference of what happens inside the courtroom versus what happens outside. And briefly, to answer your previous question, what does this mean in terms of the ecosystem of legal challenges here? Well, this is a civil case. And as you've been discussing, there are also criminal implications here. It was an interesting answer that she gave about the Manhattan DA and whether or not he would pick up on what she says she found, which is state law violations. That's for the Manhattan DA to pick up on. And she said, Southern District of New York, Criminal Division of the IRS, get ready, we're making referrals. So there is potential criminal exposure here. I know we want to focus on today, but we could also go through about the other half dozen potential exposures that the president is facing.
Graham, we have time just for really some final thoughts. And Jessica was just mentioning, and it's an important reminder that this is a civil lawsuit, not a criminal lawsuit at this point, though other things are being referred to the appropriate authorities. But she also said that the lawsuit attempts to sue the organization for $250,000 and cancel their business certificates, which is in essence a death penalty for a corporation in the state of New York. Tell us how significant that is and how significant overall this announcement is.
Yes, it was $250 million.
Sorry, yes.
And a lot of numbers.
By revoking the business certificate, this is, in terms of the powers of the New York Attorney General, this is about as extreme as it gets. So they're really going as far as she's able to.
All right.
All right, Graham Kates, Jessica Levinson, our thanks to you both on this breaking story. We will certainly discuss this with you in the hours and days ahead.
CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane joins us now for more on this. Scott, welcome. You and I have talked about all these other lawsuits. We knew that this one was ongoing, but she really laid out all the details. Tell us what struck you as the big headlines coming out of this news conference.
Yeah, that it's not just an investigation, it's the latest investigation. It's the confluence of legal troubles that are most pressing right now for former President Trump. What the state attorney general in New York alleged was that there was a fraud, a scheme to inflate values, to lie to banks, to rip people off, to enrich the Trump family. And the Attorney General says she's made a criminal referral to the U.S. Justice Department to show her findings. Her findings are in a civil investigation for which there are monetary or administrative penalties. She's referred this matter to the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. So add that to the list of potential criminal exposure for the former president. But the emphasis is on potential. There's the investigation in Georgia, where they're looking into the attempts to overturn the 2020 election results there. The ongoing criminal investigation in Manhattan, which the Attorney General referenced that she's cooperating with. This new investigation into the records seized from Mar-a-Lago. And all the while, a grand jury meeting this week in Washington, D.C., and for many weeks to come, investigating January 6th and the alleged false electors scheme. And whatever else this grand jury takes in, because they have issued dozens of subpoenas to Trump associates. So it's not so much the singular investigation itself that's noteworthy today. Really, it is the volume of investigations happening at once.
And Scott, we just showed a map showing how all these investigations stretch from Florida right up onto New York through the nation's capital. There was a clash yesterday between on the special master looking into the documents seized at Mar-a-Lago, a judge who a former federal prosecutor described as no nonsense. He's not going to take any BS. And he says prove to me that you declassified these documents and we can move ahead. The Trump team already resisting that. What does that signal for where that case moves now?
We could have answers in minutes, hours, or it could take weeks or months. There's a lot of uncertainty here. We'll set the scene of what's happening at Mar-a-Lago. The Trump team has successfully paused the investigation of those records by the FBI and the U.S. Justice Department. They went to court in Florida, asked a federal judge to hold off on that investigation until this independent reviewer, this special master, comes in, looks through the documents first to ensure there's nothing here that should be kept away from the FBI that's covered by privilege. And the judge gave the Trump team what they wanted, this pause in the investigation. And in fact, the Trump team got to choose the special master.
That's right.
The Department of Justice agreed to the name. They felt it was a good choice as well. And then that new special master, that federal judge in Brooklyn, decided to push back immediately on the Trump team's argument. This singular argument that stands out. Trump declassified some of these seized records, that they were rightfully in his possession. But all the while, as they've made that argument, they have never shown proof or put in black and white in front of a court evidence of that. And the judge says, where's the evidence? You can't have your cake and eat it too. The Court of Appeals in Georgia, the 11th Circuit, is now hearing this appeal from the Justice Department, trying to unfreeze the investigation, to overturn the pause put in place by the Florida federal judge. And that's what could happen any hour, any minute today, or it could be weeks or months. Just some of the uncertainty around these many investigations.
Scott, you certainly have a lot to dig into tonight on Red and Blue. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Make sure you tune in to Red and Blue tonight at 5 p.m. Eastern.